The devil's on the loose and he's dancing with the mummy.
Deep from the bowels of the Macabre Theater Laboratory, we bring you Macabre Cast. There is nothing wrong with your streaming service. You are exactly where you should be, where the slush puppy machine is always on and cold. Your favorite horror mag is on the rack, discreetly displayed between Women's Wear Daily and Cosmopolitan. I'm your host, Dark Mark, along with my mold-riddled counterpart, Karis, the Little Mummy, here to bring you the latest episode of Macabre Cast, where we'll be dropping R's where they belong and adding them where they don't. Yeah! Newbies, welcome. Regulars, welcome back. And worshippers, get out of here. Oh. This is a safe space for those who know if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You know, like the huge mansion with spacious grounds and a pool for the whole summer for a mere $900? If you haven't already, like, subscribe, or follow my show on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or, when I'm not violating ludicrous community standards, TikTok. Tell a friend to do the same, even that guy that would swipe the sandwich right off of old Mrs. Allardyce's tray. Yeah, that guy. If you wish to interact with fellow Monster Kids or the Drac Pack Elite, follow the Facebook page, Macabre Theater. It's there where you can send me a voice message through Messenger and participate in the show. A link can be found in the description of this episode. Or, if you'd prefer, send me an email at macabretheater666@gmail.com. Macabrecast episode 156, All Things Burnt Offerings, begins now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Adoro il cast macabro.
In this old house, behind this locked door, something lives, something strange, something evil. It will possess this woman. It will destroy this man. It will terrify this child, and no one can stop it. That was from the trailer that aired on TV in 1976. I was 7 years old, and what flashed on the screen was so quick and so random, I was unsure of what I had just witnessed. But I was terrified. Only a year off from the theatrical release of Jaws, my mom, a lover of horror movies, took me to see Burnt Offerings. To this day, it's my favorite haunted house film. This year, 2026, it turns 50. And I have devoted this episode to all things Burnt Offerings. Now, if you are a regular Monster Kid here, you know, back on episode 150, I gave Stanley Kubrick's The Shining the same treatment. When I deep dive a film like this, as you may or may not know, format is out the window. There'll be no horror news, no cobwebbed classics, no real-world horror, just all things Burnt Offerings. And beware, spoilers galore.
Hey, Doc! Did you hear the one about the constipated accountant?
No, Karis, I didn't hear the one about the constipated accountant. What about him?
He couldn't budget, so he worked it out with a paper and pencil.
Ew, seriously?
That is so gross.
And on that note, let's get on with the show, shall we?
Chapter 1. Reviews.
So I managed to dig up a couple of original reviews for Burnt Offerings when it was first released in 1976. The following I'm about to read was a well-known, for his time well-known, critic named Roger Ebert. He wrote for the Chicago Tribune from 1967 until his death in 2013. He's probably most known for a show he co-hosted with Gene Siskel called Sneak Previews and then At the Movies. The show was extremely popular, not so much for their film expertise, but their likelihood to disagree and argue, and it made for some interesting TV in such a more simpler time. As you will hear from the review I read by Roger Ebert, he was not too impressed with Dan Curtis's Burnt Offerings. Burnt Offerings is a mystery, all right. What's mysterious is that filmmakers were able to sell such a weary collection of ancient cliches for cold, hard cash. That's why they're rich and the rest of us are poor. Say I was sitting in my great room, the moths flying through the flame of sputtering candle, as I bent over my foolscape and composed this storyline. A young married couple and their son and aunt move into a Gothic mansion. It is rented to them by a cackling old fool in a wheelchair and his sinister sister. It is alleged that their mother lives in the room at the top of the house, a room that is never opened. The monthly rent is suspiciously low, but soon after the family moves in, strange events start to occur. Okay, so now the sun is rising over the lake. The muses have left to spend the day shift with Bob Greene. Exhausted by my labors, I stick my last 13-cent stamp on an envelope and mail my story off to Big Hollywood Studio. The rejection slip comes fast, so they must have had readers in the mailbox. You gotta be kidding, they say. This story has been done 1,000 times. Didn't you see The Legend of Hell House? How could you miss blah, 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 blah. Embittered, I crumple the rejection slip and throw it into the drawer with dozens of others. I abandon my writing career and sink honest work. And yet, incredibly, Burnt Offerings was not only made into a movie, it was made into an expensive one. A talented cast, Karen Black, Oliver Reed, Burgess Meredith, and the sainted Bette Davis, who was sacrificed to this slop. And the movie even has artistic pretensions. The photography is consciously arty, and the dialogue is fiercely epic. And the filmmakers didn't even have the courage to approach the material as the silly trash it is. If they had, Burnt Offerings might have been a lot more fun. When you're making a totally unnecessary retread of a wheezy old haunted house howler, the least you can do is populate it with a camp actor and write some absurd dialogue. Vincent Price and Shelley Winters might have been right for the couple, and Marjorie Gortner as the aging son. But no, the dialogue in Burnt Offerings actually sounds as if people might be saying it, and the actors turn in good, realistic performances. What a waste. But then again, it's a tricky business, making a supernatural thriller with artistic ambitions. Roman Polanski and William Friedkin have pulled it off in recent years with subtle blends of mundane and preternatural. And come to think of it, The Legend of Hell House brought out the fun, mundane, and preternatural. And come to think of it, The Legend of Hell House brought out the fun in this sort of material very well. But Burnt Offerings just persists until it occurs to us that the characters are the only ones in the theater who don't know what's going to happen next. Now this is coming from the guy who co-wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls by the soft porn king Russ Meyer. Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is about an all-girls rock band who travel to Hollywood to make it big, but fall into the underworld of sex and drugs. Aside for an excuse to have women parade around topless, it supposedly explores the dark side of show business, drugs, lesbianism, and pregnancy. That film was panned by critics, by the way, Mr. Ebert. I guess all I'm trying to do is point out that Roger Ebert dumped on a film that for its time was the epitome of foreboding. But once again, I digress. On to the next review by the New York Times, September 30th of 1976. Enter Ben and Marion with their 12-year-old son, checking out the advertisement for the summer rental home. The isolated house is magnificent but decrepit Victoriana, not beyond the power to attract, especially Marion. And the price is right. $900, not a month, but for the whole season. Ben thinks there must be a catch. And what about the housework? The house takes care of itself, says the woman, who with her rather dotty brother is offering it for rent. There is, of course, octogenarian Mom at the top of the house, but she's no trouble. Just leave a tray outside her room at mealtimes. Marion agrees. She'll care for Mom herself, and so begin the events of Burnt Offerings, which opened yesterday at a number of theaters, an excursion into eeriness, led with admirable, though not perfect, assurance by the director Dan Curtis. Here is the house as vampire, alluring, renewing itself on injury, violence, and death, capable of menace, vengeance, outrage, and murder. To it, in all innocence, come such solid actors as Karen Black as Marion, Lee Montgomery as her son David, Betty Davis as Ben's old Aunt Elizabeth, and Oliver Reed as Ben, who is subject to nightmares about a childhood funeral, one of those old-fashioned glass-sided hearses, and a chauffeur, Anthony James, whose face is going to haunt a lot of dreams for months to come. Dan Curtis times his audience immersions into the ice bath of terror with such skill that moviegoers will scarcely have the leisure to ask why some of the renters aren't a bit more observant and curious about their dwelling. Only at the end does Mr. Curtis falter. Part of the climax is predictable, and in another part he relinquishes his deftness in favor of violence and gore on a scale that clashes with his earlier restraint. Nevertheless, such is his ability that at the approach of the denouement during a preview of Burnt Offerings, members of the audience began murmuring and shouting nervous jokes in the vain effort to break the undeniable tension. Rental agents hereabouts should get down on their knees and give thanks that Burnt Offerings is opening now. It's the kind of movie that does for summer homes what Jaws did for A Dip in the Surf. The PG rating seems attributable to one long shot of Marion diving nude into a swimming pool, to a couple of scenes indicating the state of Ben and Marion's sex life, and perhaps to the climactic gore. I really don't even know what to take away from that, other than the New York Times felt that the film was mediocre. Who knows? These were the only two reviews I was able to track down, and I have heard that the reviews were pretty heavily mixed at the time, most being not in favor of it being a good film. But it still remains, as I've said, my favorite haunted house film of all time.
Chapter 2, From Book to Film.
So the book came out in 1973 by Robert Marasco, and there's probably really only three big differences in the book that were not in the film or were changed for the film. There's a little bit more about the Rawl family and their Brooklyn apartment in the beginning. The image of the hearse driver that's played upon so heavily in the film, he's barely a mention in the book. The handyman Walker from the beginning of the film, in the book he makes an appearance at the halfway point and he speaks with Marion. Where in the film he only returns at the end with Roz and Arnold Allardyce. And much like the book Jaws, where the ending seems, how should we say, anticlimactic, the end in the book of Burnt Offerings is nihilistic and ambiguous, where the film's ending is a sheer tour de force and a complete closure for the Rawl family story. The great part about getting more insight into the Rawl family in the beginnings of the book is Marion's unhappiness. Her unhappiness in her cramped life in their tiny apartment, her expensive tastes, and clearly she feels that she's someone who settled in life and felt she deserved so much more and so much better. There's also a discussion of a psychotic break that Ben suffered at one point. That is referenced in the film when he talks about a specific dream that he used to have that's now coming back. But it goes a little more in depth into in the book. As far as the end in the book, well, Davy drowns in the pool while Ben is in a catatonic state, and Marion does try to save him, but she doesn't succeed, obviously. And the house begins to regenerate right before her eyes. Marion in the book seems a lot more upset that she feels the house has turned on her than she is about her own kid dying. And there's also a full transformation scene of her into Mrs. Allardyce by this white cosmic light that consumes her. It never really explains what became of Ben unless it just left him in a catatonic state and he, starved to death. Who knows, because the book doesn't really say. And unlike the mixed reviews that the film got, when the book came out, the book was praised as an intense psychological suspense concept of the hungry haunted house.
You are listening to Dark Mark's Macabre Cast, episode 156, All Things Burnt Offerings.
Horror chap Matt knows all about monsters. He said they were coming to get me tonight.
Hey, Dark Mark, Little Carson, all the other monster kids hang out at the theater this week. It's Horror Chat Matt checking in. Well, Dark, your topic this week, all things burnt offerings. Oh boy. Let me put it this way. So, you had mentioned your love of this movie since you started this show. And not that long ago, I was like, geez, Dark Mark really sings this movie's praises. I should probably check it out. So I did watch it. And I can see why you like it. I think if I had seen this thing when I was younger, I would have enjoyed it a lot more and would have sentimental, nostalgic feelings for it. This reminds me of when I recommend some of these off-the-wall, oddball movies to friends and family and that I loved as a kid, and they come back and say, man, that thing was a turd. Now, I'm not saying Burnt Offerings was a turd by any stretch of the imagination. It was entertaining. Just wasn't really for me. On the bright side, my wife has had this. She does love a good spooky, old school, haunted house type story. She's had Burnt Offerings on her to watch list for quite a while for spooky season. So I will be rewatching this thing come Halloween time. And now that I know what to expect, I probably will enjoy it a little bit more. And my expectations won't be as high for it. Little does my wife know that for myself and the other monster kids out there, spooky season's actually year-round. You don't have to wait to Halloween to watch horror movies. But, that's what she's into. And Tarek, I actually have a question for yourself and the other monster kids out there. One of the main reasons we all tune in and participate in this show is because we all love horror movies and the macabre. I think that's safe to say. I'm curious, what are some of the other monster kids' interests besides horror movies? I know you're into your music. For myself, a couple of hobbies that I enjoy besides spending time with family. I'm talking legit hobbies here. I have a lifelong obsession with comic books. Actually, that goes back to even before my love of horror. Another hobby that I enjoy, especially with my brothers, one that I've gone in and out of for years, is, I'm not embarrassed to say it, is wrestling. Since COVID, I've gotten back into it. And one of the things I really enjoy about it is with everybody's schedule, my brothers I'm talking, it's tough for us to get together, especially with young kids involved. So to get together for a sporting event, sometimes the schedules don't match up. The best thing about wrestling, once a month, you have the date months in advance, you have the time months in advance, so you can put it on the calendar and you can get your permission slip signed by your significant other, and it's a great time to spend with your siblings if you have them. Or just friends. They don't have to be siblings, but for me, it's my brothers, and we go into the shows and we have a great time. And it's not really about the wrestling. And one of my favorite things about wrestling is no matter how long you're away from it, it's always, and you dislike it or like it, it's always there for you when you're ready to come back. That's why I enjoy it as a hobby. Besides comic books, I actually enjoy reading real books. Obviously, I lean more towards the spooky stuff. And as I mentioned before, I am a sports fan as well. And my last hobby that I enjoy to do is I enjoy when the weather's nice. I enjoy going for a nice long walk with the dog. We live near a river and a very old cemetery that has a lot of cool gravestones and markers. So I love having the opportunity to take a nice long walk through the graveyard when the weather's nice. So I'm curious to hear what the other monster kids like besides horror movies. As always, Dark, make mine macabre.
I have a question for Horror Chat. Why are you always hanging up on yourself? I used to think it was dark here, but yeah, now I'm not so sure.
Well, very true, Horror Chat. I can't take you into a time machine and bring you back to 1976. I was 7 years old when I saw Burnt Offerings. So at first, it was just scary for reasons I couldn't fully understand. But it always stuck with me. And as I saw it over and over again, even as an adult, I saw so much more that was there. And as I've said before, it was like the poster child for foreboding. I find an intensity that you don't find in films these days, and I just think it's because what had come so far and it had been so different. As far as other hobbies, yeah, obviously the band. I'm in that, but I also love drawing. I do a lot of drawing. I used to make my own comics and comic strips. I love comics and read them, although not as much lately as I used to. What I'd like to get into is marketing, so I can figure out how to market this show better than I do and get more listeners or views and win the battle of the algorithm. Always great hearing from you, Horror Chat Matt, and we hope to hear from you again next week.
Chapter 3. Dan Curtis, bringing a phantasmal tale to the screen.
Daniel Mayer Cherkos, who is known for his pen name Dan Curtis, was an American television and film director, best known for his gothic soap opera Dark Shadows, which ran from 1966 until 1971. In its first run in the late 1960s, housewives stopped doing chores for a half hour. Teenagers hurried home from school as to not miss the latest episode. I set out to watch this soap in its entirety on a streaming service on TV, and it was no easy task. In fact, I never finished it. I'm not suggesting that it was bad, not by any sake of the means, but understand it was a soap opera. And the general idea is to stretch the storylines as long as you can so the network can sell soap or whatever other thing they want consumers to feel that they need to have. Let's put it this way. Whenever Laura Harrer would come into the room and this show was on, she'd say, "Oh, watching the show about the guy who walks around the house?" She wasn't wrong. However, after a while, a piece of dialogue or a plot device caught her attention, and before you knew it, we were both binge watching Dark Shadows. To sum it up, back in the day, this show was a first of its kind, especially for daytime TV, back in the 60s. A gothic romance that slowly, and I mean slowly, introduced elements of the supernatural, eventually introducing the vampire Barnabas Collins, the real breakout character, played by Jonathan Frid. Dark Shadows would go on to introduce ghosts, werewolves, zombies, man-made monsters, witches, warlocks, time travel, and a parallel universe. This was the show that influenced horror and paranormal-themed TV shows. By 1969, it had become ABC's highest-rated daytime series, Housewives Unite. 1,225 episodes spanning over 6 seasons. And you're probably pondering over why I never finished it? To tell the truth, the story went on its parallel universe for so long, I hate to admit this, but I got bored. Dan Curtis eventually redid the whole show in movie form. In the 1970s, he had House of Dark Shadows, and in 1971, Night of Dark Shadows, both with most of the same cast. In 1975, Dan Curtis created the much-talked-about TV movie Trilogy of Terror, an anthology film starring Karen Black in all three of its stories. Most notably, the third story, about a Zuni fetish doll called The Dummy. In 1975, he was tasked with bringing Robert Marasco's book to the big screen, in Dan Curtis's first theatrical debut, bringing with him Karen Black and the composer who scored Dark Shadows, Robert Cobert. The production was almost over before it began. A cameraman was fired for shooting 2 weeks' worth of material that was improperly lit. Curtis clashed with Karen Black and Oliver Reed when he deemed their actions on set unprofessional. And most tragically of all, Dan Curtis's daughter committed suicide. Aside from the mixed critical reviews the film received, and it being considered a monetary box office flop, for several years since its release, it's been analyzed by film scholars as a commentary on materialism and the dissolution of American family. And lastly, Stephen King has always acknowledged this as his inspiration for The Shining. You can hear my take on all things Shining on episode 150.
Chapter 4 All-Star Cast.
Karen Black and Oliver Reed as Ben and Marion Rolfe. Lee H. Montgomery as their son David. Betty Davis as Aunt Elizabeth. Burgess Meredith and Eileen Heckard as Arnold and Roz Allardyce. Dub Taylor as the handyman Walker. And Anthony James as the hearse driving chauffeur. What a cast. Pure perfection. Now, it has been noted to save money on production, the cast stayed at the house used in the film, which is the Dunsmuir Hellsman Historic Estate in Oakland, California. Betty Davis did not care much for Oliver Reed, who has always been a big drinker and socially a bit of a sexist. She was very vocal about his antics and pranks he carried out at night during their stay. This was a departure for Betty Davis in many ways. She had some scenes in which the film's makeup department had to age her and make her look, well, almost close to death's bed. Dub Taylor was a lifelong character actor and born for the role of Walker. He had been in many westerns during his career, TV shows, and even a bit part in Back to the Future Part 3 in 1990. Burgess Meredith was an established leading man in Hollywood with critically acclaimed performances in Winterset in 1936 and Of Mice and Men in 1939. He was the Penguin in TV's Batman and a few appearances on The Twilight Zone. But he's probably most remembered for his role of Mickey, Rocky Balboa's manager in the Rocky franchise. Eileen Heckard was an American stage and screen star for 60 years, a winner of an Academy Award, a Golden Globe Award, and an Emmy. Anthony James, the chauffeur, was an American character actor who only had to flash a smile in this film to capture the gasps of audiences across the country. He has a long list of films, but it's this role mostly mentioned by Monster Kids. Oliver Reed's first significant roles were with Hammer Films. He had a long, impressive film career right to his last picture, Ridley Scott's Gladiator, where he died during production after a night of bar hopping and heavy drinking. Karen Black, actress, screenwriter, singer, songwriter. Her career spanned 50 years with nearly 200 credits in both independent and mainstream films, Golden Globe Awards and Academy Award nominations. Before her major film debut in Francis Ford Coppola's You're a Big Boy Now, she performed on Broadway. And finally, Lee H. Montgomery, who is best known for his role as the lonely little boy who befriends a pack of killer rats in 1972's Ben. After Burnt Offerings and Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Lee dropped out of Hollywood to work for a marketing firm.
Chapter 5, The Soundtrack.
In 2011, 35 years after the theatrical run of Burnt Offerings, the soundtrack was released by Counterpoint. But only 3,000 copies were released. Robert Cobert's music to Burnt Offerings is probably in my top 5 horror soundtracks of all time. And no, sadly, I do not own a copy of this release. When I want to hear it, I have to resort to YouTube. This soundtrack screams pure 70s, and I love every minute of it. Cobert scored the music to Dark Shadows, the 2 Dark Shadows films that followed, the 2 Night Stalker films, and its series. Sadly, he passed away at 95 years young in 2020 of pneumonia.
You are listening to Dark Marks Macabre Cast, Episode 156, All Things Burnt Offerings. Chapter 6, The Allardyce Family.
So I'd like to take a moment to look at the Allardyce family. I want to talk about the scene where Ben and his son David discover a family graveyard on the grounds. It's all overgrown with grass and weeds. It hasn't been tended to in some time. All the grave markers are Allardyces, and not one of them is after 1890. The film takes place in what was present time in 1976, so the latest grave is 86 years old. Although it is never made clear, I've always deduced that those graves are the original family bloodline of Allardyces, including the old bat herself. Each new mother absorbs the new mother, a complete rejuvenation. This is my theory, as it's never made clear. The victims, the past residents at the house, the sacrifices to the house, are the burnt offerings, if you will. Well, they get absorbed into the house and its history, hence Mother Allardyce's picture collection, which, quite frankly, the pictures look like post-mortem photography, what they did in Victorian times. They somehow served as cherished keepsakes for families to remember loved ones. Yeah, no thank you. I've read that the real reason that this was done was because photography then was expensive and rare, so this was often the only photo a family had of their loved one. Look, if you're gonna splurge that one time anyway for the photo, do it while Johnny is alive, for crying out loud. The past people who stayed at the house, the victims, the sacrifices, the burnt offerings. Burnt offering is biblical, a sacrifice, total surrender, atonement, dedication to God. I guess in this haunting tale, the god of the house is Mother. Her collection of morbid portraits, the burnt offerings. The scene in the pool where Ben finds the cracked pair of glasses, he puts them on and then he tries to hurt or most likely kill his son, as though for the moment he's possessed. And it makes me wonder about the story of the man who owned the glasses originally. And Ben, at some point, according to the book, many years ago, had a psychotic break. It alludes to this in the film, but that's about all it does. A dream of his mother's funeral and a chauffeur that I will discuss in a later chapter.
From the southwest section of hell, Jack-o'-lantern.
Hey Monster Kids, it's Jack O'Lantern coming in for Burnt Offering's 50th anniversary. Now, I don't usually call in, but I thought I should say something about this movie. It's one of, I would say, my top 3 unrecognized horror films, very underappreciated. And it was my first really, really scary movie that I've ever seen. I saw it with my family when my dad introduced me to that kind of like slow burn, very unnerving movies where you don't really expect what's about to happen next. And I think that's the part that really scared me the most about this movie, is you really don't know what's going to come next until the very end. And that's kind of like the fear of the unknown was really what got me with this movie. But I'd say to this day, it's one of the scariest movies I've seen. Just the whole premise about when... I'm not going to spoil too much about it, just the beginning part where people start getting hurt and it almost seems like the house is fixing itself that way. It's just very... The whole thing draws you in and is very unnerving to me. Just a lot of things when you look back, when you've already seen the movie and you look back and you just see everything falling into place... It makes it even scarier somehow seeing it a second time. Anyways, that's it for now. Thanks, Monster Kids.
Yes, just trying to raise my kids right by introducing them to horror classics. And so glad that for the younger generation, this film can still have the same impact. Always great to hear from you, Jack-O-Lantern, and hope to hear from you again soon.
Chapter 7, The Rolfe Family.
It's made quite clear from the book and the film that the Rolfe family represents what America was in 1976. But somewhere behind its shiny cover were cracks. Marion, it seems, was never happy. They ventured out for a new summer home vacation because the cottage that they had rented since the beginning of their marriage wasn't good enough anymore. This is according to the book. Marion's tastes and interests were far beyond Ben's earnings, and he knows this. He expected that the Allardyce mansion would be beyond his financial means. In fact, he thought the place for rent was the gardener's facility on the grounds. Again, that's from the book. Marion always wanted to live and be as though she were of Allardyce money, but she never was. She immediately fell in love with the home and caring for it, and once she began living the life she could never have, made it all the more harder to have to give up when the time came. Arnold and Roz would only rent to the right people. What they meant was Marion was the right person. The rest would just be burnt offerings. When given the ultimatum of the house or her family at one point, she points out to Ben that they had nothing. She goes about the film covering and making excuses for all the strange goings-on during their summer vacation, including ignoring a doctor's advice to have Ben brought to seek medical attention. Her spell is broken only briefly by her son's almost death in the pool. When she does fully accept her destiny, she accepts her destiny. And although many have debated for years if Ben jumps through that window or is thrown, I am fully convinced Marion threw him.
Do you want to participate in Doc Mark's Macabre cast? But you don't want to send a voice message? Maybe you don't like the sound of your own voice, or you're shy. Send Doc an email. He can read your thoughts on the show. Your opinion matters. Send Doc an email at macabretheater666@gmail.com.
And now, the new night desk attendant at the Bates Motel, Laura Horror.
Hey, Monster Kids, it's Laura Horror here. Gotta chime in on this one. Burn Offerings. Wow, what a classic. Good old-fashioned haunted house movie is right up my alley. That's just the kind of movie that I love. Give me a good old creepy, scary, haunted house movie. Anyway, I can't watch this movie without thinking in the end, don't go back into the house. Don't go back in. Don't do it. Don't do it. I keep hoping she'll just listen to them and not go back in. Anyway, I just wanted to chime in and say I think this is an awesome movie and can never get enough of it. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks. Bye.
Well, Laura Har, if you were my wife and you just wore that shoulder-off shirt that you wear every so once in a while, you can stay in that house as long as you want. You can live there for all I care. You can have whatever you want. What are you looking at me like that for?
Yes, as many times as I've seen this movie, I agree with you, Laura Har. It's still tough to sit there when she feels she needs to go into the house to let Mrs. Allardyce know where they're going and what's going on. And no matter how many times you see it, yes, exactly. Don't go in the house. Please don't go in. This time, just stay in the car, drive away forever, and never look back. But that's not what happens. And if you know, you know. Thank you so much, Laura Har. We hope to hear from you again soon.
Chapter 8, The Chauffeur.
And now, let's talk about the most talked about character in the film. Other than a haunting image from Ben's past that has come back to pay him a visit, there is no full explanation of the funeral chauffeur. So the following is my own theory on the persona of this poignant figure. The chauffeur in the first glimpses that we see of him doesn't do anything nefarious. He only turns and smiles. Ben has dreams of his mother's funeral where he first saw this person. And it seems Ben is the only one who notices him. And Ben is instantly terrified. I don't believe he even understands why. I think the chauffeur is the Grim Reaper. Instead of a cloak, he's just dressed in black and drives you to your final destination. I always saw this as when Ben was a child, he had a bit of a foreshadowing. He, and only he, got a glimpse of death at his mother's funeral. Death smiled at him as though to say, "You'll see me again one day." Now, in the confines of the house, he begins seeing death again. And when his Aunt Elizabeth is about to die, Death drives up to the house, comes to the bedroom where Ben and Elizabeth are, and pushes a coffin into the room toward them. And Elizabeth dies. The last vision Ben ever has of Death is when he takes his son and tries to leave. He crashes the car, Marion comes to bring them back to the house, and Ben says to her, "You are part of this." She turns to look at him. She's no longer Marion. She is the chauffeur.
You are listening to Dark Mark's Macabre Cast, episode 156, All Things Burnt Offerings.
The following program is rated TV MALV. It contains strong language and violence. It is intended only for mature audiences.
Metal Melody.
Ho ho! Strap yourselves in, girls. Melody is the M in TV MLV. And the constant swearing. Can you even stand it? My nerves are crushed.
Hello, Doc Mark, Karis the Little Mummy, and all the Macabre Cast fans listening in. It's me, Metal Melody, showing up for episode 150. What are we on? 6. First, I want to say There's really not been much out at the movies, so again, I haven't seen anything. A lot of the things I've seen on TV have been things we've already talked about and discussed. Movies I've probably seen for like the third or fourth time. I do want to say that I saw a 2012 movie called When the Lights Went Out, which is true events of a poltergeist haunting in Yorkshire during the 1974 blackouts. There was a monk, there was a little girl, but she wasn't bad. The monk was the evil one. And they haunted the Maynard family. It kind of reminded me of The Conjuring, but not as good. It wasn't a bad watch for a time filler. It was kind of like a B movie. I mean, the acting didn't really suck, but it wasn't great either. It kind of like, I don't know. If you downscale The Conjuring, it might have been like that. I don't No, I don't know. Anyway, I also saw Hokum, and it was an okay movie. I mean, it was pretty good. Basically, it's about an author who travels to a hotel in Ireland to spread his parents' ashes, and the hotel ends up being haunted. He goes through different hallways, rooms. There's a few jump scares in it. It's also a lot about his trauma in the past, guilt he carries, and self-forgiveness, etc., etc. I give it, I don't know, 2.5 out of 5. I wouldn't go out of my way to watch it, but if it was on, I'd watch it. Like I said, it wasn't really a bad watch. That is about it. I hope everyone has a good week ahead. Stay safe and stay healthy until episode 157, where hopefully I'll have seen more movies by then and maybe have some reviews. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Metal Melody, you're always seeing the latest horror films all the time. You're always completely on top of it, and most times jump in here with reviews before anyone else. And I'm almost starting to think maybe you should have your own podcast, Metal Melody Show. But I'm just grateful that you're here on this show to keep people abreast of what's new and what's great and not so great. Always a treasure to hear from you, Metal Melody, and we hope to hear from you again next week.
Chapter 9. The house takes care of itself.
When the Rolfs first arrive at Allardyce Mansion, if you take notice, there are weathered cracks in doors. Wallpaper is peeling. The pool is an unattended mess. But as days go by and they all seem to progressively age, things begin to fix and repair themselves. They are interjecting new life into the old house. By the time the whole family is sacrificed, the house looks brand new again. And when Roz, Arnold, and Walker the handyman return, they admire its beauty and Mother's revitalization.
Chapter 10. Not a sequel in sight.
No one has ever attempted a sequel to Burnt Offerings. I myself penned a script years ago. I pitched a logline off to Hollywood or the like, but they didn't bite. My script is a prequel and a sequel. It begins when the Allardyce Mansion was first built, and the original mother was just a little girl. It quickly jumps to her adulthood, taking possession of the home, her children, Roz and Arnold, and what happened to her husband, how Walker, the handyman, came to be part of them. We also get the story of the man whose spectacles were found in the pool. Then we jump to the present, 1976. Marion had a sister who was a recovering drug addict, who was in recovery when her sister and family vanished. She works with a detective to find out what may have happened. It all leads us to the Allardyce house. Many secrets are revealed as the two piece together the haunted history of the house. I called it Allardyce Mansion, Burnt Offerings 2. If someone hears this and steals it, well, maybe at least it will get made.
Goditi questo Episodio de Cost Macabre.
Thank you, Maria Monstalia, for telling our Italian friends to enjoy this episode of Macabrecast. One man's burnt offerings is another man's Plan 9 from outer space. I would never claim that this is the best horror movie of all time. It's just one of my favorite haunted house films. I'll take this over Poltergeist any day of the week, but that doesn't mean Poltergeist fans are wrong. I have a question for you, the Monster Kids, and please, your answer is of most importance to me. These tribute shows to one film, they're a labor of love. A lot goes into them, far more than the regular episodes. So, I ask you, is it worth it? Do you want me to continue whole episodes on occasion of one particular film? Am I wasting time? Am I barking up the wrong tree? Tell me, do I continue to make whole episodes, on occasion that is, to one film? Beware the moon. Keep clear of the moors. But most of all, remember, be good to yourself. This is Dark Mark, signing off. See you soon, I hope. This is a Macabre Theater production. Subscribe us.